Good evening and welcome to Burlington and Beyond. I will be your moderator for the evening, and we're just going to jump right into it this evening because we're very proud to introduce to you and have as our special guest tonight, State Auditor Suzanne Bump. Thanks for joining us tonight, Suzanne.
It's my pleasure, Adam.
So tell us something. I'm not sure that everyone on all of our viewers know, but what does the State Auditor's Office do?
Well, we're not like a private CPA firm. We do not focus just on the question of what the government is spending, but we do follow the money that's being spent by state agencies, by authorities like the Massport Authority or the Convention Center Authority, housing authorities, and also state contractors, people who are delivering human services or might be providing transportation services or highway services. And anyway, so we follow the money to see how it's being spent. That is it being spent in accordance with the rules? Are there proper controls to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse? And to ask the question, what are we getting for our tax dollars? And now more than ever, the auditor's office is also asking, and how can we do it better? So the job is to do not financial auditing, but compliance and performance auditing.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Is it just about the money? Is it always just the money, or are there other issues? For example, I'm concerned with, I don't know as much as I should know, and I'm so grateful that you're here tonight.
Oh, delighted.
Really, very, very helpful, and I think it's terrific for us. Privacy, information. Do you have, or are you required to maintain a kind of, I guess not secrecy, but you provide protection for people with information that is, for whatever reason, registered with your agency? Is that something that?
Well, so as we're doing our work, we are governed by government auditing standards that are set by the federal government, the Government Accountability Office and the Office of the United States Comptroller. And they set the rules for what kind of qualifications you should have. Is your staff competent to do the work? There are procedures to follow to ensure objectivity and independence from the rest of government, because the auditor's office is part of the executive branch of government, but I'm elected independently of the governor and the attorney general and the treasurer, etc. And so we have standards that we have to guide us in our audit planning and in our audit documentation and in our writing, and everything that we do, everything we say in an audit has to be supported by concrete evidence. We get that information from a variety of sources within a state agency. And sometimes from outside parties as well. And there are rules that we will follow with regard to the confidentiality of some materials, but for the most part, we're relying on things that are public records. And for the most part, if someone wanted to, they could actually make an Information Act request, Freedom of Information Act request, and they could actually look at the work papers behind an audit so that they could see how it is, what tests we ran of the data to determine that it was accurate, who did we take testimony, or who did we interview, what were all of the other materials that we looked at, so that they could see how it was that we reached our conclusions, which is a very important aspect of the audit process. When I came into office 4 years ago, I was elected in 2010. I came in 2011. I mentioned that we have to meet government auditing standards. One of those standards is that you should have your state auditor's office peer reviewed by a group of auditors from other states, your peers, that come in and determine whether you are meeting government standards. It hadn't been done for many years before I came into office. I asked for an audit, and in 2011, in the spring of 2011, just after I took office, we got a failing grade in the auditor's office. So it required us to completely, to look and it cast a very critical eye on the staff of the office. A lot of personnel changes were made. Training programs were instituted. A quality assurance unit we established. We changed all of our policies and procedures, and so to make this long story short, 3 years later, that is this year, the auditors came back. They come through the State Auditors Association, a different group of auditors from around the country. You can either fail the peer review, or you can pass with qualifications, with some deficiencies, or you can pass. And we got the highest possible rating.
That's fantastic.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really proud of that. So at any rate, we have standards that govern our operations. Most of what we do is drawing upon already public information, but it's what we do with it, how we analyze it. We're developing a capacity in the office that really exceeds anything else that's going on in state government. And I think that you can appreciate, coming from your tech background, I mean, big data, the concept of big data and data analysis. We have all this information that's collected by different agencies, but they all collect it in different ways. It doesn't easily integrate with one set of data with another. So we have been developing a data warehouse and all kinds of hardware and software capacities, as well as brain power in the staff, so that we can use multiple sets of data to give us a deeper look into agency operations.
It's getting very complicated, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, but this
you
is
get overload on data too.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So which questions are really the
being
ones
answered.
that are going to be help you get you to your
ki-
conclusions?
Yeah, it's kind of a different question. You're an independently elected position,
Yep.
and so what I'm curious about, kind of twofold question is, how much influence does the legislature have, in the tasks that you're assigned when you're looking into all the different organizations that they fund, and trying to make sure that it's done correctly? And secondarily, the other question I'm kind of curious about is, do you have any influence in working with the legislature in terms of convincing them to spend money more appropriately, and what kind of feedback are you able to give them in regards to that?
Oh, sure. I mentioned the Government Accountability Office, and at the federal level, the GAO responds to inquiries from members of Congress. Although we work to those kinds of standards, we don't have the same relationship to the legislature that the Congress does to the GAO, or even that a lot of other state auditors have to their legislature. In some states, the auditor is appointed jointly by the House and the Senate. It's another way of ensuring that there's independence from the rest of the executive branch of government, because this is all part of the system of checks and balances. And so in Massachusetts, though, I'm directly elected, and the legislature doesn't dictate what we do. There's a law that sets forth the responsibilities of the auditor's office. The directive is that we should audit to government standards, and and we should audit some aspect of every state department's activities on a 3-year basis. Quite honestly, we don't have the resources to audit every department fully on a 3-year basis, but so we focus on where are the greatest areas of risk, where is money most likely to be misspent, poorly spent, where do we really care about the outcomes, how can we serve a public purpose by informing debate on an issue. So the legislature does appropriate my budget. They're the ones that provide me with the resources to do the job. Sometimes they will direct me to undertake an audit of a particular area. Right now, we are auditing the Department of Early Education and Care at their direction. Sometimes it's more formal, more informal, and a legislator will simply say, here's something I'd really like to know about. I think you ought to take a look at this. And as a matter of fact, one of the audits that we did at the suggestion of a legislator was of the Department of Transitional Assistance. And that was an audit where we looked at whether the agency was properly determining, using all the available information to determine eligibility for public assistance benefits. We were talking earlier, and you mentioned EBT cards. that whole issue a little over a year ago that came out of an audit that we did found that the agency was not verifying Social Security numbers of applicants in all instances, and we found many folks who were receiving benefits using the Social Security number of a person who was, according to the Social Security Administration,
No longer with us.
deceased. Deceased. So, and we found that they weren't making good use of, or any use, in fact, of the fraud detection reports that they would get on a monthly basis to see if benefits, because you can track all of this stuff.
That's true. That's
where are
going back to
benefits
big- that's
where
where
are
big-
benefits
that's where
being
big data-
used?
that's where big
Yeah.
data would be able to provide
exactly.
that
So that's
information
so
fairly
we
quickly.
did that. So there was a little kerfuffle. The administration, the governor's administration, he himself said, "We don't think your numbers are right, Madam Auditor." And we sat
Why
down
is
with
that?
them and we showed them that our numbers were in fact right. And so they then themselves were able to fix that, and had actually, by the time the audit came out, because we'd sat with them enough, they knew where the problems were and they had a plan to fix it. Sometimes, though, the problems that we identify can't be just fixed by the agency, or the legislature is concerned they won't be fixed to the public satisfaction or the legislature's satisfaction. And so in that case, we partner with them to make a set of recommendations so that they can enact laws to have a better maybe system of governance. For instance, we looked at special education collaboratives. I'm not sure whether Burlington is part of a special ed collaborative, but that's when a group of school districts come together to provide special ed services to students because it's more cost effective to do it on a group basis rather than have schools develop individualized programs for just a couple of kids. And we found that in a number of collaboratives, there were the same problems of improper use of money, board of directors who didn't know what their responsibilities were, so overcompensation issues. The focus had been lost on the students. So after we finished those audits, we turned to the legislature and said, school committees have to have more power over budgets. There has to be more financial reporting and programmatic reporting to school committees. And the Department of Education has to be able to set higher standards for these collaboratives. And so within a couple of months, they had passed our recommendations into law so that we could strengthen the integrity of those programs and they could be better serving the taxpayers and the special needs students.
In many ways, you are the teacher for the Commonwealth, looking for the deficiencies and correcting them or finding the ways to improve them. That's difficult. There must be, I don't know how many mass general laws there are that govern your particular, your office, but I can imagine there must be quite a bit, and growing. And that's one of the things that concerns me is the number of laws that just continue, and regulations that just continue to come out. How do you keep abreast of all of them? Do you have people who are assigned to you, this new law has come out, you study it, and we're going to tell the rest of us how we're going to implement it? And what do you do if you find, fraud? Do you work with the Attorney General on that?
We do. So I guess the first part of your question is that we have become increasingly sophisticated, again, using data, so that because we have immediate access to so much information about how government is spending money, when we are contemplating auditing an agency, we will do a risk analysis, and so we'll look at all this financial data and look for red flags. What looks out of place? Why has there been a sudden spike in this kind of spending, this kind of contracting? But then we'll also look at other factors, such as those that you have just suggested. What has changed in this agency recently? What's a new responsibility? frankly, we'll even look at the newspaper. What's a problem at this agency where the public is clamoring for answers? So how can we, through our audit process, add value to the public discussion around this agency and help make government work better?
Sure.
So those are the ways that we approach that. And I forgot the second half of your question.
The AG, the
Oh, yes.
Attorney General,
Yes, so when we find fraud, we can bring it, or we do bring it, right to the Attorney General's office for prosecution. We've spent all of our time so far talking just about the audit function. We actually do have a couple of other things that we do. One of those things is that we are the investigative arm for public assistance fraud. So when the Department of Transitional Assistance, the Welfare Department, when the Mass Health Program, the Medicaid program, or when Early Education and Care, that provides subsidized child care, when they have reason to suspect that somebody that is collecting benefits of some type is not eligible for them, they come to us, and we have a group of special investigators that go out and investigate those. And then we work with the administering agency. Sometimes there is an outright fraud, but there's something that's gone wrong there, and repayments have to be negotiated. But we also work with we work with the Attorney General on the big cases, but then we can also bring our own prosecutions of public assistance fraud. Now that I brought in a former criminal prosecutor, to run the Bureau of Special Investigations, we've been able to prosecute more of these cases ourselves, and for the first time ever, we've put people in jail for food stamp fraud.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. In addition,
There's a lot of it.
Yeah. In addition to identifying more fraud on an individual basis.
How do you feel that the legislature has responded to the report that came out of your office? Because I personally don't feel like a heck of a lot was done at the executive or legislative level.
With regard to the Department of Transitional Assistance?
Yeah.
No, well, actually, the legislature, not only did it actually provide more direction to the agency as to how it should be doing some of its fraud prevention and fraud detection that was based on our audit, but they did provide them with more staff so that they could devote them towards those tasks. And they also created within the Office of Inspector General a program integrity unit. And I chair the Inspector General Council. And we do the after the fact work. So we see how the money was spent and we say how to fix it the next time. This unit is on a more ongoing basis overseeing how welfare is doing its job and is also providing them with more specific guidance for the future about how they ought to be conducting themselves. And so we will go back and we will say, okay, so now you have these new standards. How are you doing implementing the new standards?
Okay. Now, another one, obviously, you had alluded earlier that sometimes there's timely issues that your office will step in. Was the Department of Children and Families and what happened there? I noticed your audit was very timely, as we were hearing a lot on the news.
Yeah.
Was that just blind coincidence, or?
It was somewhat coincidental. It wasn't blind coincidence because we actually had done an audit of the Department of Early Education and Care the year before that, and found that one of the questions that the agency wasn't asking of folks who wanted to provide child care services was, is there a risk that there could be a sexual predator in the area? And so they weren't requiring daycare owners to determine whether a registered sex offender was in the area. And so we revealed that, and they immediately instituted that as a requirement. With that audit in mind, we went to another agency, Department of Children and Families, and wanted to see what kind of screening was done with regard to the foster care program. So we were already auditing the foster care program before the tragic disappearance of Jeremiah Oliver, who was later found dead. He was being his family was receiving services under a different part of the program, but our audit came out just after the governor brought in the Child Welfare League of America to look at the family services part of DCF, while we were looking at the foster care part of DCF, and found that there weren't enough social workers, which frankly I think we've known for some time. They weren't properly trained. They didn't have proper oversight. The technology wasn't there for their managers to ensure that medical exams were being done, that criminal background checks were all being completed and documented, that waivers of criminal background check findings were appropriate. There were numerous failings that we identified in that audit. So it was partly that we suspected that there were probably problems there, and then there was the unfortunate coincidence with
But
that
does someone
child.
bring that to your attention, or do you and your office, for want of a better word, prowl to find out where there are problems, or do you wait until, or is it simply information that is sent to you? I mean, do you have a not
What
a
you're looking for,
hotline?
a
Yeah, another
structural-
where do you?
Yeah, so
structural
what-
review of all
so-
the
yeah.
systems, which I suspect you do. We're going to
Right. So we do, as I said, we do try to maintain this 3-year check on the agency
groups.
on a rotating basis, but we do have the liberty to determine what it is that we're going to look at. Because if you think of the Department of Public Health, well, how many programs does the Department of
Yeah,
Public?
that's-
It would take us years to audit every one of the programs of the Department of Public Health, and we would do nothing but that. And so what we do is do this risk analysis, look at trends, what's a heavily utilized service, why is all of a sudden there so much money being spent there, where could something be going wrong, and so we have discretion. We've gotten, again, though, more sophisticated because before, frankly, the auditor's office had been doing more audits, but they weren't of the same depth and value to the agency. So, for instance, an audit before we did the fraud inquiries of Department of Transitional Assistance, the last audit had been, do you have a computer backup system? Now that's important, but is it really as important as determining whether benefits are only going to people who are eligible for them and that they're being used only in accordance with the law? So we have better people, better trained, and some who specialize in this early part of the audit process, the planning process, that help our auditors who are used to just thinking about numbers, think about policies and impacts on the public and outcomes. Are we getting our money's worth?
Do you ever get kudos from the legislature or the governor, or is that a difficult
Oh, well,
question?
kind of not so many from the governor. but really, I think that there's an appreciation of the professionalism.
Yeah, I can
the
imagine,
growing
especially if you're
professionalism of
saving
the
money,
office.
my lord,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm kind of curious,
Sure.
having done this for a period of time now, with all the different agencies that the state is organized and run. How many would you, or how much of a percentage would you say, is fraud, and how much of a percentage would you say is just out inefficiencies and just poorly run,
There's much more inefficiency than fraud.
which is usually probably the big problem?
Yeah, it is. A couple of things that I say regularly are to audiences, particularly chambers of commerce groups and other groups that before whom I speak. If you can't afford the oversight, you can't afford the program, and we are starving our government, as in the case of DCF, with the resources. Starving them from getting the resources that they need in order to serve the public interest. The other thing that I say is that accountability, rather, has to be an active front-end function in government. You have to plan for accountability. It's not, accountability isn't just standing up, being willing to say, okay, we messed up, sorry, we're going to do it better the next time. You have to plan. You have to identify the possible risks in advance. You have to train your staff. You have to have the technology. All those things that were evident in the audit of the Department of Children and Families are ways that many agencies are failing. To solve that problem, it requires the governor, it requires the legislature, it also requires the public. The public has to understand that just because revenues have gone up doesn't mean that we can expand services. You know, you've got to make sure that you've got a solid foundation for delivering those services. You don't get any, accolades for increasing bureaucracy. But in some cases,
You definitely won't in this room.
well, no, but in some cases, you've got to have the competent personnel to run these agencies, or frankly, you're wasting money.
I
And
agree
you're
with that.
and you're
Well, the
and you're
correct
lowering
application of
confidence.
resources are critical,
That's
you know,
it. And
and
you
sometimes-
lose public confidence ultimately.
Because there are some agencies, I think, that probably are just overburdened, and other agencies don't have enough resources. And
Right.
yet the inability of government to be able to take funds and resources from one group to another where it's required just seems to be a very difficult kind of methodology to
Right.
get through. Whereas in a company, it's just, boom, you're gone, and we're going to put everything over here because that's where we see the requirements.
Right.
I have a difficult question. What do you like best about your job?
What I like best about the job is so far. Now this may change in a second term, which I hope to achieve. The best part of the past 3.5 years has been bringing about the transformation of this office, so that it is much more professionalized, so that we have investments in training and investments in the capacity of staff to work with big data, to create this ability for the office to go deeper and to go from failing the peer review to getting the highest grade. So it's the stuff that the public doesn't see. You see the fruits of that labor,
Yeah.
but doing that has been it's just a marvelous opportunity for me to see people take pride in the office.
Well, this is really great because I don't think a lot of people in our audience really know what the auditor does or what the responsibilities are. So I think this was really worthwhile for them to hear it.
Yeah.
The last half an hour has gone quickly, and this has
Yes,
been a
it
great
has.
conversation. But I want to say that, one, I want to thank Suzanne for coming in. I do want to read a Boston Globe editorial that was endorsed her 4 years ago. And it said, and I'm paraphrasing, Suzanne is committed to finding ways to improve government and knowledgeable enough about government to know where to look. This half an hour has gone by so quickly that we didn't mention that Suzanne spent how many years in the legislature?
Back in my youth, I was there for 8 years. That was the 80s into the early 90s. And then immediately before running for this position, I spent 3 years as a member of Governor Patrick's cabinet as the Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development. And that's what really got the operational performance outcome juices flowing in me.
That's fantastic. Suzanne, thank you so
Terrific.
much for coming on.
Oh, it's been my
You're
pleasure.
terrific.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I appreciate
Thank
it.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Would you
you.
consider coming back?
Oh, I'd love to.
Oh,
As you
okay.
can tell, I have lots of
Oh, there's-
information and perspective to share.
Oh, I certainly appreciate
One
it.
more
take
thing.
your microphone.
One more thing. To our viewers, toot your own horn for a minute. What are you most proud of in your first term as?
Okay. Well, so to sum it up briefly, when I ran for office in 2010, I had a plan for how I was going to make the office of the state auditor your advocate for accountability in government. I had a vision for how we were going to use these audits to work with members of the public and the legislature to then make government work better in a lot of areas. And now I have a record of accomplishment. We've identified over $400 million worth of accounting variances, inefficiencies, fraud, and waste over the past 3.5 years. We have worked with the legislature on innumerable pieces of legislation, and I look forward to the opportunity to do it again.
One last question. Tell us one thing that we might not know about you. Just something fun.
My favorite household tool is a grub axe.
Wow.
And so
No, I wasn't ready for that answer.
Okay, yeah, I love to move plants around on my property, and I'm not just talking about daisies, though I like to do that too. No, I love to move bigger things around and build stone walls and all that stuff.
Good for you.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's one of his specialties.
Oh,
That's
really?
one of-
Yeah,
oh, I
Well,
love
it's
it.
Garden in
It's
Burlington.
very meditative. you
Oh,
know,
I
it's-
love it. I
yeah.
faced the front of my home with stone, hand-cut stone,
Oh, really?
and I, not too long ago, built a pond with all of the...
It's a gift
Oh,
of its
see,
heritage.
walls,
oh,
yeah.
well, I'll have to come back just to talk about that.
All
I'd
right,
love
bring
to have
pictures of
you
your own
show
garden
I
next
envy
time.
you. Oh,
Suzanne, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming.
Thank
on.
you.
It was
Appreciate
really,
it.
it was really a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
gentlemen.
Suzanne, a real pleasure. Nice meeting you.
So I got to say, I'm very impressed with who
With
we
Suzanne,
have.
yeah.
Yeah. In
It
our
was,
office.
it was terrific
That's
for her to
terrific.
come.
You know-
and it was very interesting. She's very affable and certainly knows what she's talking about. And that's great stuff. That's really important stuff.
And I
So-
think it's also terrific that the viewership gets an idea of what the auditor does, because I think that's still, one of those positions in government
Yeah.
that, people don't really grasp all the intricacies and the responsibilities that they have in overseeing the resources that the government dictates to all the different groups, and the fact that it is, at least somebody is looking over other people's shoulders and, making sure that there's at least a rational, view of how expenditures are going forward, and making adjustments when they're required, and giving that feedback
just having
to them.
saved, she said, what, $400 million?
$400 million.
Did she say $400 million?
Yeah.
Wow,
We
that's-
should reduce our taxes by 0.5 percentage point, I would think.
Well, we can thank her at least.
I'm
someone
sure it'll
reduced
end
it
up
by-
going somewhere else,
I mean, I just want to say, in the last 4 years, there have been so many reports to come out of her office. Again, so many people
Right.
don't realize what the auditor's office do, but we're talking the DCF report. We're talking, the welfare
The
abuse,
the EBT card
for lack of
report.
a better term.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, where Suzanne really caught my attention, I was home one night watching the 10 o'clock news with my wife, and we saw this report, how 119 registered sex offenders
Oh, yeah.
were undocumentedly
Yeah.
working in childcare facilities. And when I saw that, I said, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I said, regardless of political affiliation, I'm happy that someone in our state government,
Is looking out
blew
to
the
see
whistle
that.
and is, look, I have 2 kids. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's a hot button issue for me. I mean,
It is.
sure.
No, I agree.
and
I
kudos
agree.
for Suzanne's office for looking out there. Suzanne does have an opponent this fall, Patricia St. Aubin, who's a Republican, and hopefully we can get her to come on at some point and join us. But I think Suzanne, as she runs for re-election, has a compelling story to tell.
She sure does.
And
it'll
regardless
be a
of political
difficult race.
affiliation, I don't think it's any secret. We sort of, on this show, we have a slant that we come at things with. But at the end of the day, once the legislation is appropriated and the money spent, I want to see that money put to good use. And I think Suzanne is a good watchdog.
And it's pretty clear she's pretty competent, has done a really good job so far with what she's been handed,
I would
considering
agree.
the background and the fact that their agency is now, passed all the peer reviews is, pretty impressive work in a short 3.5-year period. So I give her a lot of credit. That's
Yeah.
terrific.
She reformed her own office, and now she's tasked with going out and seeing how she can improve others.
I'm impressed with her awareness of everything that's going on. I can't imagine what it must be like, given the laws that we were talking about. I mean, the Mass General laws and all the other regulations, and then to maintain a staff that must be significant with all of these people who are auditors. I mean, they must have auditors and people who are checking people and whatnot.
Well,
It's
put in
gotta be a big
consideration, I
office.
mean, the state budget is roughly $38 billion that they pass, and I think there are even more resources that are being allocated that are outside of the state budget. I think the state actually spends closer to $50 or $52 billion from information I'd seen in the past on some reviews that come in from the federal government in other directions. So there's a lot there. I mean, it's a lot to look
If we
over.
had more time, I'd be interested. I would have been interested in talking to Suzanne about, now with everything transitioning with the healthcare from the state level to the national level. I wonder where. I mean, we could have her on for a whole hour to
Oh,
talk
yeah,
about
just
that. But I wonder where things continue to follow under her umbrella versus what has now been kicked up to the national level. I just
Do you
don't
know anything about the Pacheco law?
No, I do
Can you say
not.
anything about that? Pacheco law?
I am not familiar with that.
Something that has to do with the state government insisting on contracts within union people. In other words, not allowing. I'm not sure of exactly the particular. I wanted to know. If
Oh,
she
it's
could
more
go-
like
she
it's
could
more
go
like
into-
it's more like prevailing wage or however they define it. But you have to pay if a government is contracting out a
Project labor
job,
agreement.
they have to pay the prevailing wage, which typically
No,
is
but
a union
my
structured
understanding
wage.
is that there are restrictions that they will not even allow outsiders to
Outside the state.
bid. No, outside of the well, the
Union?
unions that, and I think it's the unions that exist within the state, or at least represented within the state.
Yeah, there might be some truth to that because
Yeah.
I've never seen a public project that was not.
I've heard
you
it
know.
referred to as a project labor agreement.
Yeah.
Which, well, to other things, we've definitely got other things to talk about. We got a
Yes,
lot
yes,
to cram
yes.
into the last 20 minutes of the show. But you guys, let's do a follow-up on Market Basket.
Oh,
I know. I've been spending $40 more than I need to on my groceries every single week. Times how many weeks has this gone on for? I'm missing my favorite.
I just don't understand.
And I don't know where everything is in the
I don't know
other
where everything
stores.
is. My coffee. I get the same coffee, and it costs $2 more. On my way here tonight, I had a lean cuisine on my way out the door, but they're not the lean cuisines that I like because they have different ones at the store that I go to now versus the ones that
The sort of summation that I've heard about it is that the deepest question is if Arthur T. DeMoulis is able to prevail and he is going to borrow from 3 or 4 different sources to
Yeah,
include his
investment.
own
He's gone-
family,
yeah, he's gone
$1.5
through
billion.
investment
And someone did the numbers I heard recently, and they said, well, if he's borrowing this money and the least he can expect is probably 8 or 10%, is he going to be earning enough money to pay that? In other words, is it going to be possible for him to maintain what they did before and still be able to pay off? And I saw there was an interesting
make payroll. You're saying.
No, not just to make payroll, to pay off the money that he's borrowed.
What about the 4% that he owes everybody on the purchases that they made? Remember that? That sign hanging in the window?
I think my guess is the 4% will go, and I would expect that prices might edge up a tiny bit.
They might have to, because if you think about it, a lot of the, I don't know what Market Basket's balance sheets look like, but I'm sure a lot of their ability to carry on low cost to their customers is contingent on bulk buying and their purveyors extending them credit and possibly their lines of credit being paid off in 10 days. No?
No, the real difference between their advantages versus the other supermarkets in the area is that they're both they're owned by multinational corporations that have
Overhead
that have
expense.
bought them and have already put a tremendous amount of debt on the books to acquire these large chains. Stop and Shop and Shaw's are underneath. I think they're underneath the same umbrella, and there's
Yeah.
grocery stores in England and everywhere else. So all of a sudden you have what potentially could be the problem at Market Basket from a pricing perspective of a debt servicing scenario that is part of your cost of doing business that they've never had because it's been a family-owned business. They have no debt, and they've never had to deal with that kind of expense. So everything's dropped to the bottom line for them without having to service any of that. So servicing $1.5 billion for a 73 chain store that generates, and I don't know what their sales are in the Northeast, but it's going to have an impact. And it depends on what their current bottom line is vis-a-vis what the debt servicing aspect of it will be. So it will definitely have an impact. But it's one of the biggest reasons why the other stores are so much higher price-wise is because they've always had to deal with that issue. And I don't think it'll be as severe for Market Basket, but the 4% that they're giving back, maybe what they will have to pull back to, drop to the bottom line. But one would have to look at their
I noticed
financials to really kind of analyze all that.
I noticed today also in the article, this individual, and I can't remember who it was, that they said, you wait, when they open their doors, there's going to be such a rush. You're going to have people who are curious about what is going on and what the price, even people who were not former customers. I think that might be a little bit optimistic. I would like to see something like that happen. I certainly would like to see, and I think I've heard you two speak amongst ourselves, and I think you're probably in support, as I am, of RDT. I hope he can make it, But yes, I just wonder if he's
Oh, I
borrowing
still-
all this money.
Oh no, I still think it'll be dramatically less expensive than the other two, without a question. And
Yeah,
people,
but is he going to
people-
be able to make enough money
Yes,
to
yes.
keep the employees happy?
Yes.
And they have
Yes.
lost a significant amount of money during these.
Well,
what
yeah.
is
To
it,
be
4
honest
weeks
with you,
now?
to be honest with you, the longer this goes on, the buyout price keeps on dropping.
Yeah.
Because the value of the organization
Oh,
has
absolutely.
been continue to
But
be
you
an
know that-
impact. And the fact is that I think if he doesn't win and they go in a different direction, I think that the customer negativity on how this whole thing shook out, which is something I have never seen. I mean, this is going to be a case
Yeah.
study in Harvard like you read
Absolutely.
about. But I suspect that the impact of having customers go back because of what they've seen is going to be a real detriment. It'll take them a long time to recover from this. This is the worst public relations scenario I've ever seen a corporation go through over, personal battle. And
Yeah.
so what's the other cousin who's really not involved in the business? He just wants his
There's-
money out. And I thought the original buyout was going to be closer to $2 billion, but I think it's going to
He
continue to
hasn't dropped
deteriorate.
it, his $1.5 billion
No.
over this period, these 4 weeks when the store's been closed and they've been losing money.
They're not
because of
closed.
that.
The stores
He
are
has
open.
not.
The stores are
No,
open.
they're open, but they're not making nearly the amount of money that
There's
they
nobody
were.
in them.
Yeah,
Oh, I know. I agree because I've been to them for a few things, and it is sad.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but he has not. He has not dropped the $1.5 billion from the very initial
he's
time
kept
that he
his,
offered it.
his offer.
He's kept his offer consistent.
He
yeah.
hasn't. He
I-
tries to leverage the.
Well, as I understand it, the total value of the auditor's valuation of the
Chain.
stores is around 3.2, and he came in at 1.5. So maybe they're suggesting I want another $100 million and I'll sell out because you're not, getting to the number of the evaluation of the stores. But that seems to be, petty change considering the amount of money we're talking about here. So this still seems to me to be a personal.
They're playing cat and mouse games
It's
with
a
each
personal.
other.
This just seems to be something personal between the two that to me is
Ludicrous.
family businesses go that route. But when you're talking the sums that we're talking about here, it just seems
Sad.
bizarre.
Not only that, but it's something that has been built up, has been revered. People have appreciated, have celebrated. Now to see it get to this point is really sad. I think there's another principle involved in this whole thing, and that is look at what the workers have done. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that
The
before.
workers have gone out in support of their
Yeah.
boss.
So
yeah.
you have
For
to
the
you have to
CEO.
wonder, is a business a huge business like that, is it as RDT insists that they are the driving force, they are more important than the stockholders? Should it be that way?
Well, I think from RDT's perspective, when one of the stockholders is your cousin that you can't stand, I would think I think.
Well, he
would,
feels
but-
that way, yes. But I still think the employees of a corporation are more valuable than the investment community and the stockholders.
Yeah.
But everybody has a stake, obviously. And they have to be thought through in terms of what everybody's individual responsibilities are and stuff. But I always think that fundamentally, a company survives based on its employees, and the people that invest in that are doing that because of what they see in the organization, the employees, and what they create. Without that, you don't have any investment, coming in to begin with. So it starts there,
Yeah.
and the other aspects of it come into play.
I shop Market Basket for the price, but I have good experiences shopping
Yeah.
Market Basket. I think the quality versus price is good. Granted, when you're shopping there, it's like you're at the
40
bar in Star Wars. There's so
40
many people there, and some of the people are a little wacky that are shopping there with you.
Do you
but,
go to the one on the Turnpike?
I go to all of them.
Oh, yeah. I use the one
It
in
depends on
Billerica.
the time
40
of day. It depends on
45 years my wife and I have been going to that one in Billerica.
No kidding.
Yeah, 45 years.
I'll say I go to Wilmington.
You go to Wilmington?
Yeah, it's a little bit closer
Yeah.
for me, but it depends on.
The Wilmington one is my favorite one. I think it's
But
actually the quietest one. If you go to the one at the down at Middlesex.
Oh, that thing.
The Middlesex Mall is
and it's not big enough.
right. Yeah, it's just not big. They made it bigger, and it's still not big enough.
Exactly.
You could just knock down the walls in
Well,
that
that's
whole
because
building
that's
and
because
use
in
it
that
all as
direction.
Market
That's
Basket.
because if you go in that direction, there aren't any. So they get the Lexington, the Woburn,
Arlington.
the Arlington, that everybody comes up because the pricing is just so
And
much
then you
better.
got that H-Mart parking lot too. That's always a
pretty crowded there
That's
too.
very crowded too, so it's like a bottleneck coming down.
I was in H-Mart for the
Turnpike.
first time in my life about just a few days ago.
Food
and that is
court is
really
great.
quite a place.
Oh, the food court is fantastic.
My wife's been telling me about it.
Which, you know, so now with Wegmans coming in town in the fall, I guess
Oh,
they're
yeah.
going to open up in, a month or two. And, you know, I'm curious to see what impact that has in the greater scheme of things in terms of all the supermarkets too and what their impact's going to be. And, you know, whether they actually are able to extract business away from the other two. And it's still kind of a curiosity question when Market Basket gets back on its feet and they finally come to a resolution.
I run for the newspaper in the morning, hoping to see the headlines. Market Basket is back, and every day so far, no.
Yeah.
Well, weren't they,
nothing.
they were
Maybe
supposed to have
tomorrow.
they were supposed to have a meeting over the weekend, and I guess it
I
just
know
never
it got
occurred.
delayed, or
It's a it truly is an incredible story, though. I don't think I've ever seen anything in a commercial business environment where the employees have boycotted the company for their CEO.
Yeah.
and have persisted.
Yeah, with threats
And
of being
have
fired and
persisted.
Although I haven't
getting
seen the
replaced.
I haven't seen the people out in front as much with the signs the last few times I drove by.
Well, you start running out of steam after a while.
yeah.
That part I understand, but even so.
Anyway, there's I don't know if you want to. We've pretty much.
Did you guys
done-
want to talk about what happened in the last couple of weeks over in Missouri? Is that something that?
I am not personally fascinated with that. Well, don't have to be fascinated. I just think that it's been blown out of proportion enormously by some of the leaders and what they put in the papers and the pictures and the stories. And I think it's been a little bit excessive. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned earlier that 21 people were killed over the weekend in Chicago. And I'm not sure if any of them were shot by police. I would almost be willing to bet that at least one of them had something to do with the police. But there was no attention. There was nothing. No one mentioned it. No one ran to it. It was just assumed. And yet, this issue in Ferguson, Missouri, is just.
Well, I think the difference in Missouri, I think the difference with Missouri and what happened in Chicago is, I think it would have, for better or worse, what happened in Missouri is far more sensationalistic. When there is a cop shooting at,
Pump 5 bullets in the kid.
right? So I mean, that's another day on the streets of Chicago. It's just kind of like it's
Yeah,
like
Chicago has 500 deaths a year. I mean, 20 on a weekend is.
It's like the
you
whole-
hate to say it, but they've got
normal.
so many gangs, and
Right.
issues there that it's one of the most violent. I believe it's the most violent city in our country now.
Yes.
It might be, but it's the old adage, when it's dog bites man, it's not news. When it's man bites dog, it's news. And when you have a cop and there's a racial component to it, I just think that the best thing that we can do, first we heard that the kid who was shot was just walking along and he was grabbed, and then we heard that he was a suspect in convenience store robbery. I just think the smartest thing anyone can do is really just wait. I'd like to see cooler heads prevail on this one, and I understand
yeah.
the outrage within the
That's-
community.
I to be honest with you, I understand the outrage because I think shooting a kid, regardless of the scenario.
I thought it was extreme
It
that
was
they were.
real extreme.
I thought it was extreme that the people were gassed
Yeah,
by
by the police too.
by the police.
Yeah, I
And,
think there's a lot of things going on down there that are going to require a lot of oversight.
and there was military mecha used to
Yep.
control the crowd and curfews. I mean,
This is America. This isn't, Iraq.
Right.
And
Yes.
they got way over the top in a lot of areas, and it's going to be there's going to be a lot of recriminations. There's going to be a lot of changes down there, and it's going to take a long time for them to recover from this.
I think Rand Paul was, a lot of politicians jumped in. I know Elizabeth Warren had something to say about it, but I actually think Rand Paul had a pretty interesting perspective that he came at it and he was talking about how he issued a statement just about the militarization of the police.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
They're getting scary.
yeah, and that's been an issue that he's been.
Have you seen some of the pictures
Yeah.
of them, the way they're dressed?
Yeah,
It's
they
just
look like
wow.
they look like Rangers coming
Humvees.
at the population,
They come. Yeah, they do. Exactly. Yeah.
and that's not the kind of country I want to live in.
No. What about? Do we want to talk about Iraq at all? And just
That is another issue that is serious. I guess everything is serious. You know, someone said that President Obama is. I was just looking for this quote, and I thought it was
we made it through
interesting.
the whole
Let's
episode
not
up
blame
until now.
Obama for his many failures.
Pardon?
Let's not blame Obama. This is the title.
Oh.
Let's not blame Obama for his many failures. This is CNN's John
Can we just blame
King.
him for his top three?
That
Oh, his bottom
that's the way
three. I mean, there's so
That's
many.
the way I thought of it.
You got enough dirt there.
He says the world is on fire and people look for the president of the United States. He's essentially in quicksand right now. He's golfing. Politically, his approval rating is down to 40. People feel very pessimistic about the economy at home. They think Washington is dysfunctional daycare center, nobody can. And I'm not blaming this is John King. And I'm not blaming the president for this. It's a complicated world, and it's not all his fault. And I would say, yeah, there's a small percentage that is not his fault, but I would also say that there's a large percentage that is his fault. How do you feel about him? You've heard the stories about him going off golfing.
I don't care about the golfing portion of it because every president gets their spare time, and they really never go away per se because they've got people
Excuse
around
me?
them. No, they're
They're
never
linked
away
into what's
far away
going
from
on.
a phone, and people are in touch
Well, I
with
mean,
them
anywhere in the
regardless of where
world
they
you're
are.
not far away from a phone.
Well, I'm just saying that they're usually fairly close to whatever needs to be addressed in a short period of time. That part doesn't bother me so much as it does that his inability to cross the aisle and come to some compromises.
Show leadership.
Yeah, which Clinton was really good at. I wasn't always a fan of his in some of his political decisions, but I did like a lot of what he accomplished, and the ability of a Republican Congress with him as president did a lot of really good things, and I was impressed by that. I
Clinton was able to go out and sell an idea.
yeah, and I see none of that here. The one signature program that he pushed through was a party line vote that is going to so dramatically change how health care is delivered in this country. It's almost obscene. You should never have a program of that nature, of that magnitude, not have both parties come together with at least some agreement so that
Yes.
you've got some
Support for it.
well, you've got some synergies
Universal.
between the two parties to make it work. You've got nothing, in the political structure to make it work. The economy is still, doing nothing.
Well, look at the way it was passed. Look at the way it was
well,
passed.
that's what I
How
was-
can you expect to
He's
get...
nailed out. And
Well, not only that,
Bipartisan support.
but bribing certain senators to get their vote and stuff. I mean, it was
let's
just.
not forget even what
terrible.
happened here in Massachusetts. Let's rewind to when Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts and John Kerry and George Bush were up against each other in the presidential race. The legislature took it out of the governor's hands to appoint who the next senator would be.
That's right.
Because they were
Oh, yeah.
afraid that if John Kerry won, that a win just wasn't good enough. They were worried that they were going to lose a
Lose his
Senate
seat,
seat.
right.
So what they did, that was on the books, and then once Ted Kennedy passed away, they changed that law.
yes.
So Deval Patrick could appoint someone by the
Yes.
name of Mark
I
Kirk,
remember that
who
now.
could be the who ultimately was the
Was a guy
51st
stay.
vote
Yeah.
for
Obamacare.
Obamacare.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
that's
there was-
one that gets forgotten.
And it was the Democrats who had originally instituted that, or had been opposed to that law, and they turned
Just
around.
like Kerry,
and
they were for it.
Yeah, yeah.
They were for it before they were against
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's always going to be what you're going to see in a legislature that's dictated by or controlled by one
party.
and dramatically by
Exactly.
one party.
Exactly.
You're never going to get balance, which is really why it's such a.
That should
Such an
be
issue.
that should be our mantra, I think. We need a two-party system. For you people out there watching and looking, look at all the things that have been taking place. Look at what happened in probation. Just probation alone has been a big problem. And there have been so many other instances where the one-party system has shown its tough side, despite Suzanne's efforts, and she has done some
I was
wonderful
impressed with her.
things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Done a lot of good work.
She's a
She's-
shining
she-
example,
Yeah,
but when we say it's
something,
not
the
all
fact,
Democrats.
The fact that she was here
I
tonight with
applaud,
us,
yes.
absolutely. I agree. Very capable lady doing a great job. But anyway, what else is happening in this world. You talk about Iraq. God, I don't know. And now they're talking about
Syria.
bombing Syria. What do you bomb? Where do you bomb?
Well, there was a general, and I forget his name, but talking about the fact that ISIS has got its bases in Syria and is using that as the kickoff point to causing all the disturbances that are going on in Iraq. And the problem is there is not a neat, there's no clean answer. There's you're talking about groups that hate each other. You're dealing with a scenario that it's not clear to me what policy you can implement that in the long run that's going to make a lot of sense. I mean, we've seen Mubarak get removed. We've seen Libya's Gaddafi get removed, and we've seen these countries turn into absolute disasters in a short period of time. So it makes you wonder, just because a capitalist democratic society like the United States that has got rational people and make, for the most part, rational decisions, we hope, in how we behave with each other, that kind of government and that kind of structure may never be successful in that part of the world. And anything that we try to perceive in terms of being democracy to other parts of the world may not be the right solution, as difficult as it is for us living here to acknowledge.
Nigeria today declared a caliphate in Nigeria. The Boko Haram that.
Yeah, no. I mean, the story to come out of the last 5 years has been that radical Islam has really taken hold in North Africa.
Yeah,
it's become a real hotbed. We could do a whole episode on that, but we should probably close out. I do want to close out on a couple of positive notes.
You're going to mention
I'll get
Thursday?
Yeah. So on a positive note, we now have Scott Brown within 2 points of Gene Shaheen up in New Hampshire, an old friend of ours. So we wish him the best up there.
Yep.
And if he's performing well up there, I could, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I had kind of written him off this cycle. I didn't think that, but it seems like he's shown some of that Scott Brown resilience, and he's turning it on. And if he, I don't think he's necessarily going to be the 51st vote to flip the Senate for the Republicans, but he might actually be the 53rd. I mean, if they're running up the score that much, that Scott Brown's pulling out of a win against a pretty strong incumbent in Gene Shaheen.
Well, she is, but he's got a good combination of conservative and social views that I think fits well in the Northeast. And but she is a tough candidate. She did a good job as governor up there, and New Hampshire has moved farther and farther to the left over the last 10 or 15 years. So I think I think he's got the right personality, message, and mix of concepts that will give her a run for her money.
Yeah,
I agree.
We'll be close. If you're listening or you're watching out there, Scott, we'd love to have you in as a guest. We could.
He's got to be up in New Hampshire. They don't get us in New Hampshire, so he's got to spend
you
all
never
his
know.
time
There's
between
someone
now
may be
and now
listening
and
who knows him and
send
make a call.
Send a tape up to him, sure.
A couple of things that I'd like to promote on
Thursday.
next Tuesday. Well, Thursday we're taping it, but it won't air
right.
until Tuesday.
All
Next
right.
Tuesday we have another special guest who will appear on the show. It is candidate for governor,
Right.
Republican candidate Mark Fisher. He will be here in studio, and we will air that on next Tuesday, a week from tonight. One other thing. The Burlington Republican Town Committee is holding a meeting at Grandview Farm on Monday, September 8th. So it's the night before the primary, and we're hoping to see some new faces out there and hoping people will get involved. It is campaign season, so please come out and join us. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening, and have a great night. Thanks again from B&B.